You can hear me?
Yeah, cool. So welcoming Jamie to the call.
Hi, Jamie.
What's going on, guys?
This is broadcasting again from Philadelphia. Last week was from Argentina. And then a few weeks before that, I had a whole bunch of weeks in China. And now we're back in Philly.
International tour.
That's right. And because I'm on a low alcohol month for July, we are drinking La Croix right now. Usually we have drink reviews on the call, but we are down to a strict one drink a day.
What was the drink of choice in Argentina?
That's like a snap call question. It's Malbec, straight up and down. Actually, we had the white wine on this call before, the Tarantes, which is like cheat codes for the tongue. Cool. All right, Jamie, it's your floor. So you've got a nice topic to bring up.
Yeah, sure. Ernst & Young.
Yeah, Jamie works at Ernst & Young, EY. And that he was a former client of mine, so we had done some work together. And we also helped to organize Chain 76 together 5 years ago.
Wow,
Probably
yeah.
the largest pharma blockchain event in the US. Definitely at the time, maybe still.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a new topic, but it's one I think that we have glazed over quite a bit in use cases. So a lot of the work that I do is in supply chain, pharma mostly, but supply chain in general. And we've been trying, since way back, even before Chain 76, to figure out how to do pharma tracking on public networks, right? It's a big task. And one of the things that we started doing early on was tokenizing products and, transferring a product token from one wallet to another. And that would represent a change in ownership. But when we really look at some of the more nuanced points of a supply chain, ownership is only one type of thing that you transfer. We would call it a claim against the product, right? You can have a claim of ownership. You can also have a claim of custody, right? So I could own something, have fiscal responsibility for it, but you might be physical possession of it. So therefore, you have custody of it. And when we try to use the same token to represent a change in a claim of ownership and a change in the claim of custody, things start to get a little bit more complicated. Start adding other types of claims into the mix, like liens. All right, so that was probably the easiest example is if you own a house and you have a mortgage against that house, the bank actually has a lien against it. You're the owner, but they have the right to impair your right of ownership. You have a loan against it. A home equity line of credit is actually a probably better example than a mortgage there. And then there's one other type of claim that I deal with quite a bit. I should say there's a lot of other claims that are out there, but that's the one of regulatory seizure. So if I make products that are regulated, pharmaceuticals, in the U.S., the FDA has the right to seize those products. When they seize them, they can quarantine them, they can test them, they can ultimately destroy them. But that is another type of claim. And what starts getting tricky is not just managing the changes in those claims, but also trying to manage the rules between them, right? So, like, how can one claim impair another claim? Yeah, Will. So, and I reached out to you, and we could take a look at that little write-up if you think it's helpful for the community. There's nothing crazy in there. That's a open question around if we're representing products by using product tokens, can we use some sort of maybe it's a different type of token, or I tend to think it's some sort of a governor contract on top of the tokens that manage claims, if that's the right terminology for it. I think there's no formal definition of these type of things that I've been able to find, and I wanted to start getting this discussion out in the community to come up with a good formal definition of it.
Yeah.
So I'll pause there.
This is great. So we're looking holistically at the different types of ways that we would track a thing, whether it's the ownership, the location, regulatory. I'm trying to use a different word than claim, but
but you did say something. I want to make sure that there's not confusion there. So, like location, right? A location
is not custody.
Rights over that per se. That's more of an attribute. right? If you have physical control over it, that's custody. That's kind of location, I suppose, in a way. But like where you actually are is a little different than the claim of custody. If that makes
Good point. So attributes are more, including GPS, including temperature. These are different from claims because claims require a third party. Well, attributes are validated by a third party.
Sure, they could come in through like an oracle. You can have many different attributes. A lot of times we keep those things in like the metadata of a token, right? I don't know that it belongs somewhere.
Yep.
I think where the claims piece has gotten a little confusing is like when you have a smart contract that maps a token to an account, oftentimes that mapping, that ownership, the transfer to, rather the transfer from, we're saying the owner of that account, or see, I'm mixing the words up now too. Whoever has that account is the owner of that token. And what I'm trying to say, ownership, owning the token is one type of claim. Custody of a token is another type of claim.
Maybe property or attribute is going to be the more generic word. So I'm reaching for a word that describes both of these things. So I'll just call it properties. So a location is a property.
Yeah.
But a location is just a number. And ownership is a property. However, the ownership doesn't point to a number, it points to a specific agent. So
that's a good distinction. Yeah.
The agency is really categorically different than some type of text or date or model number, serial number that is, if it's pointing to the agent, then that party is maybe having some abilities to shed that agency or to transfer the agency.
Yes.
Which makes it interesting.
Yes.
The only type of agency we've really looked at has been ownership.
Would the agents have authority to do, I guess, different things depending on the type of claim, right?
Yes. 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 So like a claim of custody really just lets you transfer custody, right? You can move it, you can give it to somebody else.
I can think of more you can do with that. If you're a custodian, we're assuming custody means physical, right?
Yeah.
That might give you permission to add attributes.
Oh, this is a good point.
Like temperature. Like you can't you can't be the one putting the temperature in if you don't have custody. Like that don't make sense.
So actually this is a good point. Having any particular claim against an asset should give you the right to sign metadata, is my generic word of adding attributes, right? So you can sign things against that token if you have any claim to it. And it should be known who's particular signing that. So yes, if they're in physical possession, you should be able to update something like temperature of the product. But if you're the owner of it, you might want to update something like an expiration date or a different thing that you particularly control.
Are they really attributes? Are they appended? So there's going to be like an appending log. This is also something that RAD was working on. RAD, another client working on luxury goods. So you have a watch, you take it for service, and then that is append. It's always append. So you're appending a new state to the thing. Now, the way they look at this, they've actually tackled the same problem. So when you work on a watch, you give the token to the watch fixer. And then they would, since they have this scepter, I don't know, since they're hot, then they can put in their records like, yes, I did perform service on this watch. And then they have to give the token back to you when you take possession of the watch. So it is kind of ownership. I mean, it's more like possession, but it does grant the authority to append records.
You still own the watch, even when the watchmaker is working on it. They just have custody of it. So in that case, the claim of ownership wouldn't be transferred. The claim of custody would. Right?
Yeah, and that is handled in the meat space. So you can give somebody a watch. Doesn't, is ownership 9/10 of the law? If you walk into a laptop repair store and you give them your laptop, too much, then, is it their laptop or is it your laptop? Well, this is actually handled via contract. There's a lot of laws around this, and there's nuance, which doesn't matter. I mean, like these nuances are going to prevail. So if you give a laptop to the laptop repair shop, maybe at the time that you drop it off, it's yours, but after 90 days, it's no longer yours, as stipulated in a contract that you signed on paper. Sure. And ideally, the token space and the meat space will align. But not everybody even knows that contract. It might be private. So Whereas for RE&E and for fixing a watch, it might be good enough because you go to a watch repair shop, it's an authorized place, there's a reputational risk if they were to steal your watch, there's proof that you gave it to them, there's an assumption you're going to get it back, you probably signed a contract. So giving them the token and then them giving you back the token doesn't really matter if it's an ownership or a custody token because those things are twined in the meat space in contracts. But here, we want to do something more nuanced, more granular, and we want to record this publicly, or at least on a chain.
On a chain,
Could it be public? Is all this public? Or
well,
that's a whole another dimension.
You want to be able to do this public, but under privacy,
right?
Which that's a probably
verifiable.
Yes.
Yeah. At least verifiable between two parties, and at least exposable by those two parties if they need to. Let's just say at a minimum like that. Okay, so we've got an idea about this. Let's look at a little bit of prior art here. Ever since CryptoKitties, there has been a demand for people to own the cats and then for other people to use the cats.
Mm-hmm.
One of the hot topics is NFTs in games. I'm really scare quoting hot because I don't necessarily support these applications the way they're being done. There's a lot of people that are thinking about this too. They're thinking about, I want to own a token, but I want someone else to use it for me. I want to own this pair of shoes, but I want somebody else to walk in them so I can get free money for walking. That, I think, is the most common ancestor to what we're talking about here.
And I think they're correlated, but I do think they're different, right?
I don't think they're different. I think this is more general.
What I think is really interesting is this idea that all these claims are actually referring to the same physical asset, right? And that these claims can have rules between them, like that claim of seizure, right? If an authority invokes their claim of seizure, the claim of custody gets overruled, right? So like there's different things there that I don't know I've seen implementations of. I've seen implementations of multiple types of claims, but they all created a separate token per claim, and I think that gets very confusing very quickly.
Yeah, if you're using a separate token for claim, then really the only thing you're thinking about is a claim where you have a thing, they have the thing, and you don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that implementation solves a lot of problems.
Okay. Sure. But if there's, again, multiple claims against the same asset, managing those as individual tokens, I think, would require you to somehow map all those tokens together to get the full picture, right? Mm-hmm.
Claim of lien is one to many. There can be multiple liens against an asset. And
this actually, that particular point will say it solves a whole other issue of over collateralization. Yeah. In fact, now that I think about it, insurance could actually a different type of a lien, or I'm sorry, a different type of a claim way. Doesn't necessarily, but maybe the point there is, I don't think we'll ever have a comprehensive list of types of claims, right? They will vary by asset, and people will keep coming up with different types of claims you might want to make that for very valid reasons.
Maybe really the question is, if you have a claim, are you able to sublet that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you give it to someone else? If you get to give it to someone else, can you yank it back? If you give it to someone else, is that unilateral or bilateral? Can you give custody of something to someone else? Can you record that the custody has changed, or do they have to accept the change?
Yeah. I mean, you can, in the real world, you can do this in many different ways, right? Custody is usually transferred upon delivery or receipt, but sometimes you have to confirm one or the other before it's official, right?
Yeah, we have Incoterms on that, which is a whole thing.
Yeah. But a lot of times, again, back to some of that first kind of use case there, changing custody doesn't necessarily mean you're changing ownership. This is happening more and more in the world of like vendor managed inventory is what it's called a lot of times. All right,
that's a good keyword.
Stays on my books until you sell it. Then last transfer of ownership, you derive your profit. at that point, custody usually falls to.
So, ownership of an asset on a blockchain just means that like some wallet or contract is listed in a, on the blockchain as its owner.
Yep.
And like ownership is just like, that's what ownership is, and it's like attached with certain abilities based on, like the NFT standard or whatever standard of digital asset you're using. So, it sounds like the solution here is a custom contract where instead of traditional, there's an owner that can trade this stuff. There's a digital asset with a bunch of claims attached to it, and the claims might have one wallet or contract attached to them, or many, depending on the type of claim. And then depending on the type of claim, those wallets or contracts attached to the claim have abilities or don't to do things to the asset, like update certain pieces of its metadata. Or, I guess there wouldn't be ownership in the traditional sense.
Oh yeah,
all,
yeah.
right?
No. This is a very valuable concept. This is not academic. Having a piece of paper somewhere, a blockchain that is globally unique across jurisdictions, that is consensual relationship between adults, saying who owns a thing, that's valuable. It's easy for one drug to be owned by two different people in two different countries at the same time, and auditors on both sides will agree that it's on their books. This becomes less possible when you have a blockchain.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of this is why I call this managing claim states, right? Because if you're able to lay out all the possible claims against an asset when it comes into creation, and then changing those claims, whether it's ownership or custody or regulatory seizure, or invoking those claims, if you just think of that as a state table, right? The current state of all the claims is the latest transaction in each one. And Daniel, kind of to your point, when you were picturing it, like on chain today, ownership is just the account that's mapped to the NFT, right? To the token. I almost think you could solve some of this in a way with some account abstraction, like a governor contract on top of the actual token contract, where those claim states might be enforced.
So you're modeling it as a state table, which is smart because everything's a state table. You're imagining some of the different abilities that people will have, like regulatory seizure can block a transfer. They can actually do more than that. They can revert a transfer.
Possibly, yeah.
That's just how actually, you think it was transferred, but then it was retroactively null and void, which is totally a thing that happens.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that. That could be an interesting way to solve that particular piece. Yeah. And so the tables that I kind of laid out there that you scroll through was just following that sort of orange through its life cycle from the time it's picked to the time it's sold to the time it's consumed. The only thing I think interesting there is, like, in the end, you as a customer, this guy, I think I said Charlie was buying the orange. Like, once it becomes an individual asset, like owned by a citizen and not an entity, some of these other claims become null and void. So, like, regulators, well, at least for farmless, the FDA will not come to you and seize product.
So there's some words here we use for this. So we call this vending, like a point of sale vending. Right? That's a pharma term. But then on the blockchain, I think one of the words we're using here is called fuses. So a fuse is broken and where the functionality is no longer applicable.
Okay.
I'm gonna be honest. So here's my hot take. Good idea. Makes sense for the application. It does not standardize well.
I would push back on that. In my world of enterprise, right, and enterprise supply chain, I do see demand for being able to manage stuff in this particular way.
I see much more likely that we will see an SAP version of this, and rather than we're seeing a generic claims machine.
When we rely on a system to do that, like an SAP, you've centralized a lot of that control into a software provider. All right. I've definitely seen a lot of very strong movement towards not being reliant on a software provider or a single platform.
No. The same thing could be used by other vendors, by Oracle and everybody else. But the way Oracle's using it would be the same way that SAP is using it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. But yeah, that's kind of like the argument I was making in the first place, that you need a standard to start with this stuff.
That's the thing. I don't know if you need a standard to start it or if you need an implementation to start it.
I see. Well, you need both.
If you have one ledger for all this stuff, I think that's a win.
Yes.
Across multiple ERPs, across multiple buyers and sellers, that would be a win.
Yeah,
but I think
this is consistent with some of our the philosophy on just tokenized product in the first place. All the different software solutions that exist today for managing resources or logistics or inventory, things like that, they should be able to ingest, change data, token transfers, right? And that's where the interoperable piece of it comes from.
Yeah, I still like this. I'm not exactly sure how it gets to market. I would like to see some of the ERPs. I would like to see, is the sales ERP the same ERP that handles temperature and humidity in flight for these products? Because these are all related. This ledger is going to have all that stuff in it. If they're different ERPs and production systems.
Yeah, I think going your first couple comments about like the attributes or properties of these tokens. In reality, they live in many different systems or ERPs, right? So if a product, let's say, changes hands 5 or 6 times across its life cycle, right? Like different entities that own that product across its life cycle, each one of them will have a different system. They may all be the same SAP, but it's very unlikely that they're the same SAP environment, right? So that data, especially if it's off-chain, is going to be stored very likely will be stored in many connected off-chain databases, I guess is the right way to say it. In my opinion, the best way to link them back through is maybe some decentralized storage or using the URI as a pointer to different storage locations and being able to serve that kind of stuff up. I'm trying to figure out what direction to take this, right? I don't think this is something that can be built by a software provider, right? I think this is something that we need an implementation out there for it. Well, to your point, maybe an implementation comes before a standard per se, but I am curious to see if the folks in this community think that this would make sense to pull into the EIP process of something.
I mean, my standard advice is MVP POC Monday through Friday, nonstop. Putting this through an EIP, I imagine that you're going to maybe get some echoes out of the people, like I said, the people doing GameFi. I don't think you're going to get any other ERP people out there.
Yeah, if you think it's valuable to have them weigh in on that process, I know they want to. If we thought it would be valuable for enterprise folks with an enterprise mindset to come and weigh in on this, I think that's an easy thing to coordinate.
Personally, I think that's the wrong venue for what you're proposing here. If we wanted to give it the best shot, then we would probably set up workshops in different forms, go to where they are.
Mm-hmm.
We would bring a technical section, like a plenary or something. And then, we would do phase 1 like that. And then eventually when we get deeper and deeper and we're doing proof of concept, we'd actually do a cross-connect party, which is we're far away from that. But I would definitely meet the people where they are and garner influence through different industries. I think that's the only way you're going to get the right amount of feedback. Because if you called all those people and you're like, hey, I want you to show up on this technical discussion, they're not going to show up.
And introducing a concept like this, maybe to your point before, having an implementation that shows like how this works into those projects will definitely get some traction. Part of what I worry about is those projects are not talking to each other. Everybody thinks they have secret sauce.
There is no secret sauce. The secret sauce is reputation. And since nobody has reputations, they think the secret sauce is something else. And they're all wrong. So yeah, you work for an organization that has reputation and connects with people that do. So that's why, you're going to succeed here. Cool. All right. So we have a thing that we do. We do a raid on Twitch. So somebody can yell out, Jamie, you get the first dibs. You just yell out some topic or keyword, and then we find somebody else who's live streaming. Right now, there's 400 people watching us on Twitter. So we just drop all those people, Twitch. We drop those people onto somebody else's channel.
Like a topic that's interesting?
Or if you know a specific streamer who's live right now on Twitch, that's cool too. Or if you just give keywords.
Attested sensors.
To be clear, when I type these keywords in, you're most likely going to be dropping into a video game where people are shooting each other, but the name of the room is called Sensors. which is kind of just how this works.
All right, now I understand the rule.